Yamaha is a unique company in that when you hear the name, you think of one of two things: music or motorcycles. You'd be wrong in saying that's all the company does, and I'll get to that, but these are the two things they're most known for, and it's weird, right? These two things aren't related in any way. I wouldn't imagine the two are helping each other very much. They're completely different industries. Here's what I mean. If you're really happy about your Yamaha piano and now you're looking to buy a new guitar, you're likely to seek out one made by Yamaha, because whatever you liked about your piano, you're expecting to see it in the guitar, the quality or the sound or whatever. The name carries a reputation in the industry. But now, imagine you're looking to buy a new motorcycle. The fact that you like your Yamaha piano probably isn't factoring into your decision very much, if at all. So it's just a little unique to me how Yamaha has made a name for itself in two completely separate industries. Now, I'm not implying they're at the top of either industry, but they're sure a big part of them. Any musician watching this is very familiar with Yamaha, and anyone who knows anything about motorcycles knows about Yamaha. I actually don't know which is more well known. I'm sure it depends on the person and where you're from and how old you are, your hobbies, obviously. I'd like to take a small survey. In the comments, let me know, when you hear the name Yamaha, do you think of music or motorcycles? And let me know why you think that's the case. I want to talk about what this company looks like today. It's actually two separate companies. I'll get to that. But first, I want to take a look at how it all started, because it's quite an inspirational story. It takes place all the way back in the late 1800s and concerns a young, industrious man named Torakusu Yamaha, and obviously that's where the name Yamaha comes from. He started off as a watchmaker, even owned his own watchmaking business for a while. The business didn't work out, and he started a job repairing medical equipment. The job would bring him to different towns, and one of these towns was very isolated. A school there had a reed organ in need of some repairs. Since they were so isolated, their best bet to get it fixed was asking Mr. Yamaha to take a crack at it. While repairing it, he started thinking about how well these would sell throughout Japan. Soon after, he was able to create his own prototype organ. He then needed to deliver it to the Music Institute, and to do that, he carried it on a pole over his shoulder through the mountains. I know, it's starting to sound unreal, but this is what happened. When he got there, the organ was criticized for its poor tuning. So in response, Mr. Yamaha spent 4 months full-time studying music theory and tuning until he was finally able to create a proper organ. That organ led to a small organ manufacturing company that led to the company that we know today. Here's the logo Yamaha uses that hasn't changed much for the past 100 years. It can be a little hard to tell what it is, but it's actually 3 tuning forks intersecting, and it's inspired by those 4 months of hard work spent learning about tuning. This is an amazing story. If there's any Hollywood screenwriters watching this, please make this your next project. All the parts are there, but do the thing where we don't learn it's actually the origin of Yamaha until the very end. Maybe refrain from calling him Mr. Yamaha until the final scene. Not to spoil The Dark Knight Rises, but I think you know what I'm saying. And since that movie doesn't exist yet, let me try to pull a few lessons from it. Keep an eye out. This was a medical equipment repairman just by chance looking at an organ. It doesn't sound like something that would be significant, but he made it significant. It's a little strange to think about it like this, but if that organ in a school in a secluded town in Japan didn't need repairs, there would be no Yamaha company today. Follow through. He didn't go home and tell his friends how someone should start an organ manufacturing company. He did it. You know how I just told you someone should make a movie about this? Perfect example of me ignoring this lesson. I'll admit it, it's a little embarrassing because Mr. Yamaha would have had this in pre-production by now. Be determined. You don't carry an organ prototype across the mountains unless you're determined. And persistence. That prototype wasn't even that good. It took 4 months of intense studying to learn how to make it good. I'm sure we can learn more from this story. You could tell how much I respect it, but we have to move on. We're not even in the 20th century yet. Within 2 years, Yamaha's company had 100 employees and was making 250 organs each year. And it didn't take long for them to expand into similar instruments. In the year 1900, they made their first upright piano. 2 years later, they made their first grand piano. You can see how at this point, they were up and running. So I'd like to skip ahead to the 1940s because that was a big decade for the company. Early in the decade, they started making guitars, but then in the middle of the decade, they were forced to stop making all musical instruments because of the war. Their focus turned to making fuel tanks and wing parts, but they made a big return after the war. Late in the decade, the Japanese government made musical education mandatory for children, and as it turns out, that was great news for a manufacturer of musical instruments. Up until the 1950s, Yamaha hadn't made much of an impact in the United States, and it was their motorcycles that helped change that. They started making motorcycles and started marketing them in the United States. During this period, and many years after, the average American would likely identify them as a motorcycle company and really knew very little about their presence in music. I'll make another big jump and skip to what Yamaha looks like today so we can get a better understanding of the scope of this company. Up until this point, I've been trying to keep it simple by treating it like it's one company, but it's really two. Basically, there's Yamaha Corporation and there's Yamaha Motor Company. The company that started in the 1800s and deals with music is Yamaha Corporation. The company with the motorcycles is Yamaha Motor Company. It's been like this since the 1950s. Yamaha Corporation would traditionally own about a third of the other company, but it's been slowly decreasing. Today, it's down to less than 10%. Now, first, looking at Yamaha Corporation, the biggest part of their business is exactly what you would expect: musical instruments. They make up 63% of all sales, and they come mostly from Japan, followed by North America, then Europe. These numbers are pretty reflective of their overall sales by region as well. So, for anyone in America or Europe or somewhere else who think of Yamaha as being a big brand name, they're much bigger in Japan, as you may have already expected. Their next biggest segment is audio equipment. I've neglected to even mention this until now, but it's 28% of all sales, making it a very significant part of their business. This is stuff like AV receivers, speaker systems, amplifiers, mixing consoles. The remaining 8.6% of sales are categorized under other, which includes golf clubs, among other things. That's everything you would know from Yamaha Corporation. Now for Yamaha Motor Company. This, of course, is where you find the motorcycles, but there's also a lot more. But motorcycles do make up 62% of their sales. According to surveys conducted by Yamaha Motor, the worldwide demand for motorcycles was around 54 million in 2017, and they provided around 5.4 million of them. So you can say they were responsible for about 10% of all motorcycle sales. Next, there's marine engines, which are boat engines, of which the world demanded 820,000 of, and Yamaha provided 301,000, which is about 37% of all sales. There's personal watercraft, which is like a jet ski or wave runner. Wave runner is actually the name of the product Yamaha provides. The world demanded 97,000 of them, of which Yamaha provided 43,000, about 43% of all sales. I don't want to go through all this for each product, but I think it's interesting, so a few more. Snowmobiles. The world demanded 128,000 of them, of which Yamaha provided 11,000. For golf cars, the world demanded 181,000 of them, where Yamaha provided 65,000. They also make swimming pools and ATVs, generators, snow throwers, as they call them. I call them snow blowers. Also electrically power-assisted bicycles, electric wheelchairs, automobile engines, industrial use, unmanned helicopters. And I'm not even naming everything. I just brought up many different products where Yamaha is a significant manufacturer. Bringing it back to the beginning, they do make musical instruments and they do make motorcycles. There's two separate companies that carry the Yamaha name, and those are the primary products for each company. But each of them also has an extensive catalog of other products. You can find a golf club with their name on it, as well as a swimming pool. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about one company, or I suppose two companies, manufacturing such a wide variety of products like this? At first glance, I would think it would just lead to a bunch of bad products. They make so many different things, how can they give proper attention to any one of them? But with Yamaha, that's not really the case at all. They've done it in a deliberate way, where most of what they make isn't too much of a stretch from, well, either music or motorcycles. Can you think of another company that operates like this? Someone that's one of the biggest names in two unrelated industries. Oh, and let me know if you plan on writing a script for that movie. I don't need any monetary payment for giving you the idea. A very simple, brief credit at the end of the movie would be perfectly fine. There is so much more that could be said about Yamaha, but it's outside the scope of this video. Maybe it'll be revisited in the future, but until then, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.